A single, ambiguous exclamation broke the sudden silence. Someone murmured thoughtfully, wondering aloud who this mysterious person could be. Shock suddenly washed over them as a startled gasp escaped their lips. Panic set in immediately as they desperately wondered how the situation had devolved into such chaos. She found herself completely captivated by an otherworldly face with garnet eyes and golden hair swaying like silk threads. Flustered and sweating, she admitted out loud that she could no longer think straight. Apologizing profusely, the young man asked if she was hurt since she had jumped in to protect him. Staring at the girl's rainbow hair and rose quartz eyes, she realized such a wild color scheme only existed in games. The mere concept of a video game echoed confusingly in her racing mind. Suddenly, memories from her past life flooded back, colliding with her current existence as Elna Newman, the daughter of a viscount. She remembered a viral Otome game featuring a rainbow-haired heroine, recalling that players typically started with the main prince route. Piecing the clues together, she realized the man before her looked exactly like the prince her friend had shown her in her previous life. When the prince asked her to say his name, she froze and admitted she didn't know it, suddenly realizing she was trapped in the Otome game Rainbow Paradise. A bystander loudly pointed out her ignorance of his identity, while someone else gently suggested the unharmed prince should stand up. A sharp voice commended her for helping but chided that the prince didn't need to stay on the ground, advising her to prioritize her own safety. A quiet gasp of awe swept through the gathered onlookers at the dramatic scene. The crowd whispered about the striking beauty of the lady who saved him, noting that even her thorny tone held a strange appeal. Confusion rippled through her as she processed the title of His Highness being used by the murmuring crowd. The prince confirmed he was fine and asked if she could stand, urging her not to push herself after protecting his head. Despite the sheer embarrassment of falling in public, he decided the humiliation was entirely worth it to save such a beauty. She recalled that the blonde prince was a main love interest in Rainbow Paradise, starring alongside the rainbow-haired heroine. Panic struck her as she realized she might have just ruined the game's first major encounter by bluntly telling the prince she didn't know his name. Bowing deeply, she offered her most sincere apologies while he kindly asked her to raise her head. Her heart pounded as he brushed off the incident, assuring her that he had acted on his own accord and she shouldn't worry. Relieved that the handsome and kind-hearted love interest wasn't angry, she quickly tried to excuse herself from the scene. Before she could flee, he stopped her and softly requested that she finally call his name. Caught in a trap, she panicked because a country noble calling a prince by name was insolent, but admitting she still didn't know it was equally disrespectful. A sharp voice suddenly cut through the rising tension, formally interrupting the royal exchange. The newcomer noted the lady's pale complexion and insisted on escorting her to the infirmary as a precaution. Agreeing with the medical assessment, they quickly excused themselves to escape the incredibly awkward situation. Gazing after her retreating figure, he mentally declared her an absolute angel for saving his life. Meanwhile, gossiping students whispered about the sheer audacity of a girl claiming not to know the prince's name. The murmurs intensified as the crowd agreed that it was incredibly weird for anyone to not know Prince Granat. Letting out an exhausted sigh, she realized she desperately needed a moment alone to organize her chaotic thoughts. Even though the doctor had strictly ordered her to rest, her troubled mind refused to stop racing. She reflected on her identity as Elna Newman, finding it strange how entirely natural being a viscount's daughter felt. Frustration set in as she wondered why she had reincarnated into a game she barely knew instead of one she had actually played. Overwhelmed by the massive influx of information, she confessed to herself that her head was an absolute mess. A silent moment hung in the air as the weight of her new reality settled over the quiet room. Seeking a familiar comfort, she decided that focusing on embroidery was the absolute best way to finally calm her nerves. Sitting alone, she realizes the sheer fact of her reincarnation is completely irrelevant at this point. The real problem is that she has already encountered a main character in a world based on an Otome game she never even played. Regretting her lack of attention to her friend's ramblings, she realizes she only remembers the basic appearances of the main cast. She anxiously wonders if the story's progression strictly revolves around the main cast or if it aggressively drags innocent bystanders into the plot. Frustrated by her severe lack of information, she acknowledges her past life memories are her only vital clues. Clenching her fists, she resolves that she desperately needs more hints to secure a peaceful school life. Digging into her fragmented memories, she vaguely recalls her friend mentioning magic being exclusive to the Saint route. She vividly remembers her friend obsessing over the prince's incredibly divine graphics and screaming about his literal sapphire jewel eyes. To her surprise, she remembers finding the heroine way cooler than the male leads and honestly falling for her instead. Her flashback abruptly shifts to a mundane memory of deciding to finally try the cafeteria's ramen noodles. Realizing her memory is practically useless, she sighs in defeat over her inability to recall actual game details or even what ramen is. She grimly notes she cannot even remember her own death, wondering if she was taken out by a classic isekai truck accident. Firmly branding herself as a mere background character, she declares a calm, uneventful academy life as her absolute top priority while vowing to avoid the main cast entirely. A sudden contradiction strikes her as she echoes her friend's frantic obsession over the prince's sapphire eyes. Confused, she recalls that the actual prince she just met possessed deep, beautiful garnet-colored eyes. Pausing her sewing, she stares down intently at the half-finished floral embroidery in her hands. Inspecting the threads, she realizes the camellia red is running dangerously low. She mentally notes the urgent need to buy more red thread to finish her intricate needlework. Jolting in surprise, she looks up as the rainbow-haired heroine explains she had been knocking, but Elna was too absorbed in her sewing to notice. Completely caught off guard by the heroine's sudden presence, Elna asks why she is there, only to hear the girl came to apologize. Waving off the apology, Elna insists she is deeply sorry for causing trouble and warmly thanks the girl for helping her earlier. Smiling gently, the heroine expresses her relief at Elna's safety and admits she was lucky to witness something truly wonderful. Staring at the girl's cute yet strong demeanor, Elna understands exactly why the prince fell for such a perfect heroine. Admiring the beautiful, ethereal rainbow hair she had once mistakenly pictured as an afro wig, Elna realizes she might already be falling for her. The heroine leans in close, utterly mesmerized by the incredibly delicate embroidery she has never seen the likes of before. Thanking her politely, Elna explains her dilemma about running out of thread and needing to purchase more. She casually reveals that she used to spend all her time back home sewing because the rhythmic activity calms her nerves. A sudden blush creeps across the heroine's face as she stares at Elna with intense, glittering eyes. Flustered by the overwhelming attention, Elna shyly accepts the heroine's offer to recommend a good shop for embroidery supplies. As the warning bell rings out, the heroine kindly asks if they can walk back to class together. Overwhelmed by the rapid progression of events, Elna stammers out a weak, hesitant agreement. The heroine happily reveals she checked with the teacher and confirmed they are in the exact same class, leaving Elna utterly speechless. Trying to calm her racing heart, Elna rationalizes that interacting with the heroine should not affect the main story and prays she will be fine. Approaching the door, she immediately overhears harsh whispers from classmates pointing out the girl from the earlier incident. Standing paralyzed before the classroom entrance, she anxiously wonders what terrible ordeal awaits her now. Stepping inside, she is instantly hit by a heavy, suffocating atmosphere radiating from the glaring students. The malicious gossip aggressively targets the rainbow-haired commoner, condemning her shamelessly composed attitude after supposedly disrespecting His Highness. Shocked by the misplaced blame, Elna realizes the story's relentless plot force is twisting her own rude actions to maliciously target the heroine instead. Scanning the room, she spots not only the heroine but also the prince from that morning and several imposing noble ladies. Noting their vibrant, colorful hair, she instantly deduces that the classroom is absolutely packed with main characters. Terrified by her immediate plunge into trouble, she realizes her turbulent academy life has begun despite her desperate wish to remain a background character. The instructor confidently calls the academy class to order, announcing that the students will learn the correct knowledge and usage of magic. He explains that admission depends entirely on magical power rather than social status, gathering students roughly the age of Japanese high schoolers. Elna quietly wonders why she was chosen, having only accepted the enrollment because nobles generally attend the academy anyway. Her eyes widen in genuine shock as the teacher warns that any students lacking magical aptitude will be promptly expelled. A wild spark of hope ignites within her as she realizes that failing might guarantee a straight path to a carefree life back in her territory. The instructor continues his lecture, revealing that hair and eye color are deeply connected to an individual's magical power. He elaborates that the type and amount of magic can alter these physical features, sometimes even changing a person's hair color as they grow. Glancing around the vibrant classroom, Elna notes with satisfaction that her own hair and eyes are remarkably plain compared to her peers. She calculatingly deduces that her exceedingly ordinary appearance likely means she possesses absolutely no magical power. Her gaze drifts toward Lily Keel, noting how the rare, magic-bearing commoner with rainbow hair naturally commands everyone's attention. She silently acknowledges that this vibrant, rainbow-haired girl is the undeniable heroine of the game's central narrative. A brief wave of pity washes over Elna as she observes the impending drama destined to surround the main cast. Determined to survive this dangerous game world, she resolves to remain completely invisible and act as though she is made of thin air. The teacher warmly wraps up his speech, congratulating the new students and wishing them a wonderful academy life. Scanning the bustling crowd, Elna marvels at how incredibly colorful everyone is, just as one would expect from main characters. She mentally questions the game's mechanics, wondering why the prince's eyes differ so drastically from the original package illustration. Her attention suddenly shifts to a sharp-looking red-haired student nearby, speculating if he serves as the prince's personal guard. Staring into the boy's dark obsidian eyes, she feels a jarring rush of familiarity that heavily reminds her of her older brother. Shock hits her like a physical blow when she finally recognizes the imposing guard as her actual brother, Theodore. She stares at him in absolute disbelief, utterly confused as to why his hair looks completely different from what she remembers. Theodore casually greets her as if no time has passed, inquiring if she is all right after supposedly hitting her head. Ignoring her obvious confusion, he lightly teases her about being late and jokingly asks if she is going through a rebellious phase. Suppressing an exhausted sigh, she realizes she has countless questions but decides to hold back and simply tells him not to push himself. She winces under the crushing weight of the surrounding girls' glares, finding the intense attention from talking to her brother physically painful. Leaning in close, she whispers frantically to ask Theodore if their older brother Leon knows about his secret presence here. He formally introduces himself to the gathered crowd as Theo Berkman, His Highness's guard, prompting her to gasp in sudden realization. Connecting the dots from his use of a fake surname, she quickly concludes that she must keep their sibling relationship a strict secret. When pressed by a curious student about her connection to Theo, she nervously lies and claims they have only exchanged greetings once before. A sharp-eyed noblewoman named Lady Mises steps forward, suspiciously pointing out how unusually friendly the two appear to be. Panic bubbles aggressively inside Elna as the main characters converge, terrified that the story's gravity will drag her into the main plot. Suddenly, a smooth voice cuts through the rising tension to politely interrupt their suffocating gathering. The newcomer shifts the focus entirely, asking Elna what she wants to do regarding the embroidery thread shop they had previously discussed. Viewing this person as a literal angel of salvation, she hastily excuses herself from the dangerous crowd of main characters. The two smoothly walk away from the bustling classroom, successfully leaving the tense encounter and the main cast behind them. They continue strolling down the quiet, ornate academy halls in a comfortable and relieved silence. Slowing her hurried pace, Elna finally catches her breath after narrowly escaping the narrative trap of the game. She thanks her rescuer profusely, to which they humbly wave it off and ask if they should actually visit the shop. She firmly and enthusiastically agrees to go, leaving her companion slightly surprised by her immediate eagerness. Her companion looks at her with a hint of vulnerability, softly asking if she intends to avoid them in the future. Smiling gently, she assures them that she doesn't avoid them, noting it would be incredibly rude to ignore her savior. Surprising her companion, Elna insists on walking despite the shop being a fair distance from the city center. Stunned by Elna's intention to personally negotiate the price and check the thread colors, the other girl asks if she truly plans to bargain by herself. Realizing her countryside habits are showing, Elna awkwardly notes that typical noble ladies probably avoid haggling. Upon being asked for her name, she formally introduces herself as Elna Newman, projecting an aura that is neither arrogant nor humble. Internal panic instantly sets in as she realizes that giving her real name completely ruins her chances of remaining an unnoticeable background character. Regretting her slip-up, she listens as her companion formally introduces herself as Lily Keel. Smiling brightly, Lily offers to guide the distressed noblewoman and suggests they go together. The two girls walk side by side through the bustling streets of the royal capital. Breaking the comfortable silence, Lily gently calls out to Lady Elna as they stroll. Waving off the formalities, Elna asks to be addressed casually, but Lily firmly insists that a commoner cannot speak to a noble lady so informally. Surprised that an Otome game heroine would care about strict class etiquette, Elna decides she will just call her companion Lady Lily in return. Lily quickly points out the glaring issue of a noble addressing a commoner with a formal title in public. Conceding the point, Elna silently agrees that drawing public attention would only invite more unwanted trouble. Reaching a comfortable compromise, they finally agree to use the slightly less formal honorific Lilisan. Shifting the conversation, Lily curiously asks if Elna is personally acquainted with the second prince's guard. Downplaying the connection, Elna explains she merely greeted him a long time ago, prompting a thoughtful nod from her companion. Lily's expression turns serious as she warns Elna to be careful, leaving the noblewoman thoroughly confused. Before the mysterious warning can be fully explained, they arrive at the shop's elegant entrance. Stepping inside, Elna gazes around in sheer awe at the beautiful interior. The helpful shopkeeper approaches, offering a newly stocked, highly recommended shade of red thread. Highly impressed by the pristine selection and stellar service, Elna praises the exceptional standards of the royal capital. Returning with the product, the shopkeeper presents Red No. 39, an elegant deep red nicknamed Granat's Red because it matches His Highness's eyes. Admiring the beautiful hue, Elna innocently asks why using that specific nickname is considered too much of a risk. The shopkeeper explains it is highly disrespectful to use a royal's name without permission, sparking Elna's delayed realization that there is actually a royal bearing that name. Chipping in, Lily gently reminds Elna that the second prince is actually in the exact same class as them. Impressed by the heroine's knowledge, Elna finally connects the dots and realizes the second prince is His Highness Granat Here's. Deciding to purchase Red No. 39, Elna mentally laments how easy it was to live in the countryside without memorizing the royal family tree. Stepping back outside with her purchase, Elna sighs as she realizes her finished embroidery pieces will just uselessly pile up in the capital. Lily gasps in pure shock when Elna casually mentions she used to sell her embroidered handkerchiefs at festival stalls back in her territory. Elna fondly explains that her mother encouraged her to earn her own allowance, making the stalls a fantastic source of income. Smiling at the memory, she notes that her creations were affectionately known as lucky handkerchiefs and were actually quite popular. Struck by sudden inspiration, Lily turns to Lady Elna and announces she has a brilliant suggestion. Later, Elna glows with deep gratitude toward Lily for her incredible help. Still reeling from the success, Elna expresses her utter disbelief that the shop actually agreed to display her embroidery pieces. Brushing off the surprise, Lily reassures her that the shop already deals in popular handmade goods, making it a perfect fit. Determined to repay the massive favor, Elna insists on thanking the flustered heroine somehow. Blushing softly, Lily hesitates before softly making her request. Shyly looking away, the heroine asks if she might also receive one of Elna's famous lucky handkerchiefs. Thrilled by the request, Elna happily promises to have one ready by tomorrow, leaving Lily beaming with eager anticipation. The two girls continue their stroll down the sunlit street, their bond solidifying as they head back together. Settling down with her embroidery, Elna finally claims some much-needed healing time. Exhausted from an incredibly information-heavy day, she sighs in sheer fatigue. Admiring her newly purchased thread, she notes how perfectly it matches the striking color of the prince's eyes. Staring intently at her handiwork, her mind uncontrollably drifts back to the unexpected encounter. The vivid memory of the beautiful prince's face flashes clearly in her mind's eye. The blonde royal's earnest voice echoes in her memory, gently pleading for her to call his name. Flustering wildly, she buries her face in a pillow and desperately tries to shake off the bizarre memory. She realizes that the sheer impact of the prince's charm is utterly overwhelming even for someone who never actually played the game. Acknowledging the danger, she admits she would have ascended straight to heaven if he had been her favorite character. A sudden knock on the door violently interrupts her frantic thoughts, prompting a quick response. Her exclusive maid, Sophie, enters the room and immediately points out Elna's concerning complexion. Checking her forehead for a fever, Sophie remains unconvinced despite Elna insisting she is perfectly fine. Deducing that her eldest brother Leonhard has returned, Elna immediately declares she will go see him. Greeting her with congratulations on enrolling, her eldest brother Leonhard casually mentions hearing about her first day detour. Noting she went to buy her favorite embroidery thread, he slyly suggests she should check magic or prices during future day tours. As Franz attempts to interject, Leonhard quickly waves him off and claims he is only joking. Shifting the focus, Elna furiously questions the absurd setting of their other brother Theo using a disguise and an alias to guard the prince. Leonhard calmly explains that Theo, posing as the fourth son of a baron, was chosen for the mission due to his sincere diligence despite being an apprentice. Brushing off her critiques as overly strict, he flatly refuses to divulge any further details regarding Theo's classified mission. Reminding her that Theo at least greeted her, Leonhard pauses as his sister hesitates to bring up one more pressing issue. Elna practically begs him to ensure their fabricated stories align, prompting Leonhard to promise he will pass the message along. Voicing her deepest concern, she questions if a lack of magical aptitude will completely ruin her chances of advancing to the next grade. Dejected over her presumed failure, she admits she honestly just wants to return to their territory soon. Leonhard stares at her thoughtfully, silently absorbing his younger sister's genuine anxieties. Gently placing a reassuring hand on her head, he reminds her that she just enrolled today and should focus entirely on learning first. Accepting his comforting advice, Elna bids her brother a respectful good night and prepares to leave. Watching her depart, Leonhardt murmurs cryptically that he highly doubts she will fail to advance, leaving his true knowledge a lingering mystery. A familiar voice called out to Lady Elna, presenting a mysterious bundled object for her immediate inspection. Recognizing the fabric immediately, she confirmed it was the exact handkerchief she had excitedly mentioned the previous day. The delicate cloth rested carefully in her hands, silently holding the unspoken weight of their growing friendship. Eagerly asking for permission to open the bundle, the young girl elicited a slightly startled gasp of agreement from Elna. Unveiling the hidden contents, the girl marveled with wide, glittering eyes at the incredibly lovely craftsmanship. Praising the absolute beauty of the intricate work, she thanked Elna deeply while internally validating her own suspicions about the gift. Suddenly remembering her urgent academy duties, the girl hastily bid her farewell and dashed off down the busy hallway. Watching her fast retreating figure, Elna smiled warmly and thought about how incredibly adorable the heroine remained. A heavy, suffocating wave of dread suddenly washed over Elna as she sensed intense glares piercing her from all directions. Scanning the suddenly hostile room, she realized the crushing attention was solely because she had briefly conversed with the main heroine. She mentally sighed in exhaustion, recognizing this as the standard game trope where the commoner heroine is aggressively isolated by jealous nobles. Despite the dangerous social pressure, she resolved not to distance herself since she deeply owed the girl for a crucial thread and stitch. Yearning desperately for a peaceful academy life, she groaned inwardly and fiercely debated how to safely navigate this messy social minefield. A sudden, loud greeting violently shattered her train of thought and made her jump backward in sheer surprise. Theo casually wished her a good morning, playfully teasing her for reacting so harshly to his perfectly normal greeting. Adopting a rigid posture, Elna formally addressed him as Sir Theo, prompting him to instantly request she drop the stiff manners. Frustrated by his deeply condescending attitude, she angrily threatened to have their older brother Leonhardt lecture him about treating her like a child. Quickly backing down from the terrifying sibling threat, he casually suggested she just stick to calling him Theo. A sudden, regal voice echoed from behind them, curiously repeating the informal nickname aloud. Elna froze entirely in her tracks as a cold wave of absolute shock rippled through her trembling body. Turning around slowly, she stared in complete disbelief and frantically wondered why the crown prince was standing right in front of her. Stepping aside smoothly, Theo formally introduced the handsome blonde man as His Highness, the very royal he was tasked with guarding. She shot a murderous glare at her idiotic brother, furious that he was carelessly playing with her reactions while she was trying to maintain their secret. Suppressing a massive, exhausted sigh, she composed her expression and offered her most sincere apologies for the disrespect. Bowing with perfectly practiced grace, she formally introduced herself as Elna Newman to the towering prince. The prince kindly instructed her to raise her head before officially introducing himself as Granat Heerhers. While he gracefully apologized for his delayed introduction, Elna mentally panicked over how she continually ended up in these terrifying narrative situations. Smiling warmly down at her, he expressed his joy at their proper meeting and boldly requested that she call him by his first name. The sheer weight of his incredibly casual request left her staring at him in totally stunned, wide-eyed silence. She fiercely directed her blame at Theo, violently mentally snapping that his careless messing around had made the entire encounter painfully awkward. Quickly regaining her strict noble composure, she respectfully declined the prince's request by stating it would be highly inappropriate and rude. A fleeting, subtle look of disappointment crossed the prince's striking face as he quietly accepted her steadfast refusal. Breaking the incredibly heavy tension, Theo smoothly intervened and urged the prince to head toward their classroom seats. Turning to leave, the prince flashed a hopeful smile and promised he would eagerly look forward to the day she finally used his given name. The two prominent royal figures turned their backs and gracefully walked away down the ornate academy hallway. Left alone in her spiraling panic, she frantically reminded herself that a low-ranking noble could never casually address a royal by their first name. A soft, familiar voice suddenly broke through her racing thoughts to gently ask if something terrible had happened. Malicious whispers and harsh judgments instantly erupted from the gathered crowd of female students surrounding her. The jealous onlookers heavily criticized her overly familiar attitude with the prince, noting how incredibly shameless she was acting in front of his top fiancé candidate. A suffocating, intensely hostile atmosphere completely enveloped the room as the rainbow-haired heroine gently called out Lady Elna's name once more. Suddenly addressing Elna, Lily claims the teacher is asking for her and suggests they leave the room together. Grabbing Elna by the hand, the heroine rushes them down the grand hallway to escape the hostile classroom environment. Finding a secluded spot where no one will bother them, Lily apologizes for dragging Elna into yet another troubling situation. Waving off the apology completely, Elna quickly asks if Lily is alright, prompting the heroine to hesitate. Looking highly contemplative, Lily lets out a soft hum as she processes the tense events that just transpired. Realizing the intense scrutiny she faced back in class, Elna admits she felt like she was sitting on pins and needles despite their brief interaction. Lily gently points out that Elna knows very little about His Highness and sternly warns her to be careful moving forward. Confusion washes over Elna as she confirms Granat is merely the second prince, prompting Lily to ask her to listen closely. Leaning in with a deadly serious expression, Lily explains that His Highness is considered an absolute prime catch among the nobility. Completely baffled by the bizarre terminology, Elna stares blankly and repeats the phrase in utter confusion. Lily breaks down the royal hierarchy, noting that the king has 3 children including first Princess Pol, first Prince Smaragd, and second Prince Granat. She explains that becoming the first prince's wife requires impossibly strict qualifications, making the second prince a much more flexible and accessible target. Connecting the dots, Lily reveals that this exact flexibility is why countless ambitious nobles eagerly throw their names in the ring for Granat. Panic flares in Elna's mind as she misinterprets the warning, frantically wondering why the heroine is blatantly declaring her intent to aim for the prince. Lily immediately shatters this misunderstanding by bluntly stating that anyone who even gets close to His Highness is instantly marked as an enemy. Horrified by the grim prospect, Elna desperately resolves to avoid getting dragged into the Otome Game's forced romantic plot. Sweating profusely, she realizes she must actively dodge being labeled a romantic rival by the rabid noble ladies and especially by Lily. Elna furiously laments that she never wanted to get close to the royal, complaining that merely being greeted by his guard Theo dragged her into the crossfire. Staring intently at her stressed companion, Lily asks if Elna realizes that interacting with Theo is also a massive problem. Tilting her head in genuine confusion, Elna desperately asks Lily to clarify exactly what she means by that ominous warning. Lily explains that while Theo is just a baron's 4th son, his formidable skills, handsome looks, and royal backing make him a highly sought-after bargain for early investors. Dropping the ultimate bombshell, Lily declares that because both the prince and Theo spoke to Elna, she has officially been marked as a prime enemy. The sheer weight of this terrifying revelation crushes Elna, leaving her stunned as the words echo ominously in her mind. Trembling with sheer anxiety, Elna realizes her dream of being a peaceful background character is completely dead now that she is actively being targeted. Sensing her rising panic, Lily smiles reassuringly and gently tells her new friend not to worry. Stepping closer with unwavering confidence, the heroine solemnly vows to stay by Elna's side and protect her from the vicious nobles. Flustered and completely overwhelmed, Elna stammers in disbelief at the sudden, fierce declaration of protection from the game's main character. Lily casually explains that since her commoner reputation is already at rock bottom, she is perfectly willing to ignore noble customs to forcefully drag Elna out of danger. Flashing a bright and comforting smile, Lily urges Elna to cast aside her fears and rest easy under her watchful eye. Trapped by the heroine's overwhelming charisma, Elna reluctantly accepts the offer while internally panicking that sticking with Lily guarantees dangerous encounters with the prince. Satisfied with their new alliance, Lily turns to leave and warns that they need to hurry back to class to avoid being late. As they walk back through the halls, the grim reality of their situation looms heavily over them. Returning to the suffocating classroom, Elna braces herself against the piercing, cold stares of her jealous peers while dreading her turbulent fate. Slumping exhaustedly at her desk, Elna realized she had taken the situation way too lightly because ending conversations was surprisingly difficult. She mentally reviewed the bizarre morning greetings, assuming the prince's demand to be called Granat was just a scenario event meant to raise his intimacy level with Lily. Lily cheerfully approached Elna's desk to ask about lunch plans while the surrounding girls glared daggers at them both. Recalling the terrifying royal request, Elna mentally screamed that she absolutely did not want to die by casually using the prince's first name. She sighed in exhaustion at Lily's shockingly UN heroine-like behavior, silently wishing she would just use standard insults or sarcasm instead. Slumping further into her chair, Elna desperately prayed for the main characters to finish their game scenario and get together already. A looming shadow suddenly fell over her desk as she wondered exactly why the prince kept insisting on talking to her. 3 haughty noble girls suddenly cornered her, sneering that they had finally tracked her down to this isolated spot. The leader of the trio aggressively slammed her hand against the wall to trap Elna in a classic bullying posture. Glaring down with vicious intent, the noblewoman ordered Elna and Lily not to get too carried away with their recent attention. Her cronies chimed in maliciously, accusing the girls of brazenly taking advantage of His Highness's natural kindness. Elna stared blankly at the perfect, textbook noble lady and remained utterly unfazed by the cliché harassment. Impressed rather than intimidated, she mentally praised their terrifying courage for actually standing up to the game's main heroine. Cutting straight to the point, Elna bluntly asked if the bullies simply wanted her to avoid getting close or involved with the prince. The bullies flinched in shock as Elna instantly agreed, excitedly begging them to take over all future conversations with His Highness. Bowing respectfully, she loudly declared that she was counting on their full cooperation to keep a lowly kingdom noble like herself far away from the royal. Furious and confused by her eager compliance, the flustered leader violently commanded Elna to hold on. Desperately trying to regain control, the bully aggressively brought up Lady Mises and praised the Duke's daughter as the perfect fiancé candidate in looks, status, and manners. Elna's mind instantly wandered to Lady Mises's impressive physical assets as she vividly recalled her knockout bombshell figure. Stuttering defensively, the bully yelled that Lady Mises was in a completely different league from commoners and country nobles. Elna completely tuned out the rant and silently wished this annoying leader type would just take over the exhausting task of dealing with the second prince. A cunning idea suddenly struck her, completely shifting her demeanor as a mischievous spark lit up her eyes. Interrupting the tirade, she casually dropped the massive bombshell that His Highness was awfully insistent on being called Granat. Feigning humility, she encouraged the shocked girls to fulfill the prince's apparent wish by freely using his first name themselves. Cheering them on with a bright smile, she told them to have fun amongst themselves and practically sprinted away from the dangerous encounter. Leaving the bullies utterly speechless behind her, she smoothly dismissed her cunning manipulation as absolutely nothing at all. Back in class, the instructor explained that students with immense magical power must first learn to control it to prevent accidental spellcasting. Resting her heavy head on her desk, Elna groaned internally about how deeply exhausting the entire day had been. She desperately daydreamed about failing the magic assessment so she could return to her peaceful territory and spend her life doing nothing but embroidery. Her mood instantly brightened as she remembered that tomorrow was finally the day she would deliver her completed handkerchiefs to the shop. Excitement bubbled up as she considered making more handkerchiefs in different colors since she felt extremely proud of how well Lily's turned out. She specifically recalled the vibrant Granat's red thread and admired how beautifully striking the rich color looked. A sudden flash of bright red caught her attention and instantly ripped her away from her peaceful embroidery daydreams. Glancing across the classroom, she spotted the prince and Lily standing together and reaffirmed her desire to just watch them safely from a distance. She silently begged the universe for the two main characters to get together already since seeing them side by side was a genuine feast for the eyes. While the teacher continued droning on about magical theory, Granat unexpectedly turned his head toward Elna's direction. Their eyes locked across the crowded room and sent a massive jolt of panic straight through Elna's nervous system. The prince flashed her a breathtaking, devastatingly handsome smile that immediately short-circuited her entire brain. Clutching her chest in absolute defeat, she admitted that a smile that beautiful could effortlessly bring down an entire kingdom. Flustered and blushing furiously, she quickly lied to her concerned neighbor that absolutely nothing was wrong. The scene opens in a bustling shop where exciting new preparations are underway. Elna proudly presents her lucky handkerchiefs to a shop clerk, politely asking them to confirm the delivery. The shopkeeper examines the goods carefully, her sharp merchant instincts suddenly kicking in at the sight of the delicate embroidery. Showing the intricate work to her colleague, the clerk excitedly declares that these beautiful items will definitely sell. Elna expresses her deep gratitude as the clerks praise the lovely craftsmanship and eagerly agree to stock them as merchandise. Curious about her meticulous process, the clerk asks Elna how she usually goes about making these handkerchiefs. Elna awkwardly explains that she channels her daily frustrations into the embroidery, treating the fabric like a punching bag to drive away bad things. Quickly changing the subject, the clerk moves the conversation toward the logistical details of selling the goods. The shopkeeper asks what brand or personal name Elna prefers for consignment, noting that most people simply use their own names. Hesitating quietly, Elna admits it feels entirely wrong to use her noble family name without explicit permission. A helpful clerk chimes in and suggests the name Gluck, explaining that it perfectly translates to good fortune. Elna enthusiastically agrees to the suggestion, thrilled by the clever concept of branding her work as good fortune. Lily warmly congratulates Elna on the wonderful choice, prompting Elna to smile and thank her new friend for the support. Internally, Elna celebrates this small financial victory, viewing the extra pocket money as a safety net in case she flunks out for lacking magic. She desperately hopes to quietly retreat to her home territory without getting dragged any further into the Academy's forced dramatic scenario. Shifting away from the lively market, the scene transitions to a quiet, tense moment elsewhere in the kingdom. A sharp knock suddenly interrupts the heavy silence before someone calls out for Theodore to enter the room. Theodore steps inside and immediately confronts the occupant, demanding to know why he keeps maliciously messing with a furious Elna. The person in the room vaguely deflects the harsh accusation, cryptically claiming he has his own hidden reasons for targeting her. A quick flashback reveals Prince Granat intimately requesting that Elna call him exclusively by his first name. Theodore exasperatedly points out that demanding a girl use his first name is basically declaring a massive royal romantic interest in her. Prince Granat remains utterly resolute, stating firmly that he desperately needs to confirm a critical piece of information. A heavy, suffocating silence stretches between the two boys as the immense weight of the prince's secret agenda hangs in the air. Acknowledging the thick tension, Granat asks Theodore to honestly confirm if Lady Elna is truly just his distant relative. Granat calmly explains that he simply wanted to investigate whether Elna was secretly involved in their overarching, dangerous situation. Theodore silently reflects that his true identity as Elna's brother is strictly hidden by royal decree, forcing him to pose as her distant relative named Theo Berkman. He nervously wonders if the incredibly sharp-minded prince already suspects that Theo Berkman is entirely a fabricated fake name. Pushing his internal doubts aside, Theodore demands to know how forcing Elna to say the prince's name actually confirms anything. Granat slowly holds up a mysterious, glowing object as he prepares to explain his highly unconventional investigation method. The prince reveals the object is a special magic ore that can flawlessly detect a person's magical power and type if two people hold it and speak a name. Theodore suddenly connects the dots, realizing Granat ruthlessly ambushed Elna to secretly check her magic before classes officially began. Annoyed by the prince's severe lack of tact, Theodore scolds him for singling out a lone female student, while Granat defends his attempt to gauge her magical affinity. Granat promises that once he verifies she is uninvolved, he will drop the matter completely, knowing full well Theodore refuses to share any actual information. Recognizing the terrifying gravity of the prince's life-and-death situation, Theodore begrudgingly accepts that Granat has absolutely no choice but to investigate every single lead. Granat casually assumes his logical explanation completely settles the issue, seemingly unbothered by the sheer social chaos he caused. Theodore stares at him in pure disbelief, aggressively questioning if a mere magical test is truly the prince's only reason for harassing his sister. Granat openly admits he never expected the situation to drag on this long, clearly frustrated by Elna's relentless, frantic evasiveness. Theodore sharply defends his sister, fiercely telling the prince to stop blaming Elna when she is simply doing her absolute best to navigate the overwhelming situation. Taking a step back to cool off, Theodore acknowledges that Granat is incredibly desperate to uncover the truth concerning his own life and his late mother. A nearby colleague suggests they just tell Elna the entire truth, but Theodore quickly shoots down the dangerous idea, citing strict gag orders from His Majesty and their mother. Theodore warns his peer to drop the subject entirely if he values his life, noting that angering his fierce mother over her wish for Elna's normal life is a fatal mistake. The colleague swiftly agrees and excuses himself to return to Prince Granat's side, pausing to warn Theodore to be extremely careful as well. Theodore tells him to pass on a firm message, explicitly asking Prince Granat to back off and stop bothering Elna so much. Left completely alone, Theodore sighs heavily, strongly suspecting that the incredibly perceptive Elna will probably uncover the dangerous truth on her own eventually. He rationalizes that if Granat truly wanted to force her, he could just use a royal order, reassuring himself that the prince's motives are strictly investigative and not romantic. Deciding not to overthink the incredibly messy situation any further, Theodore confidently concludes that everything will somehow work out fine in the end. Lily and Elna exchange cheerful good mornings as they meet in the academy hallway. Another student happily greets the girls, noting that they have arrived quite early again today. Elna mentally repeats that she is just a background character while someone nearby asks Theo why His Highness isn't with him today. Her desperate attempts to remain invisible are shattered when she gasps in sudden realization at her brother's presence. Theo casually walks up and wishes Elna a good morning, completely ignoring her internal panic. Sighing internally at her foolish older brother, she wishes he would resist the game's narrative force just a little bit more. Leaning in slightly, Theo mentions he actually has something important he needs to discuss with her. Before Theo can continue his thought, Granat unexpectedly arrives and warmly wishes Lady Elna and Lily a good morning. Elna laments internally that she didn't escape in time to avoid this massive narrative collision. Bowing respectfully, Elna greets the prince while he expresses his relief at catching her right before class starts. Admiring his dazzling smile, she naturally assumes his incredibly good mood stems entirely from finally getting to speak with Lily. The prince steps closer, fixing his intense and undivided attention directly on Elna instead. Catching her completely off guard, he asks if she remembers the magical aptitude check scheduled immediately after their theory lesson. Recalling the teacher's warning about unintentional magic usage, she realizes the test is meant to measure high magical power and special abilities. Granat intensely calls out her name, aggressively breaking her wandering train of thought. With a completely serious expression, the prince bluntly asks Elna to be his official partner for the upcoming check. Stunned into total silence, she stares at him in blank, uncomprehending shock. The heavy weight of his incredibly unexpected request hangs in the tense, silent academy air. Panicking violently, she asks if he actually meant Lily, but he firmly reiterates that Lady Elna is exactly the one he wants. Elna mentally screams in terror, realizing that being completely unaware of these wild narrative shifts is truly frightening. She dreads the horrifying test requirements, knowing that holding hands and saying a partner's name could easily be mistaken by onlookers as a romantic confession. Trapped between wanting a quiet expulsion and fearing she might cause trouble for her noble family, she realizes rejecting a royal invitation without a valid excuse is deeply disrespectful. She forcefully grips her skirt, viewing this inescapable social dilemma as effectively the same as a terrifying death sentence. Desperate for an immediate out, she stammers wildly and lies that she has already promised to partner up with Lily. Granat looks slightly taken aback, repeating Lily's name in obvious surprise. Lily smoothly steps in to save Elna, confirming the fake promise by explaining she was worried no one would partner with a commoner until Lady Elna readily agreed. Theo quickly intervenes and gently steers the disappointed prince away, stating it would be rude to interfere with a prior engagement before the teacher arrives. Once the boys leave, Elna profusely thanks Lily for the rescue, but Lily humbly insists it was true that no one else would have partnered with her anyway. Staring at her savior in absolute awe, Elna internally praises Lily as a dazzling angel and a perfect goddess. A sudden wave of regret hits Elna as she realizes that by claiming Lily, she carelessly prevented the prince from partnering with the heroine and triggering a crucial love event. Looking toward Lily, she mentally vows to gladly surrender the partner seat back to His Highness the absolute moment their lovey-dovey event finally kicks off. Lily politely excuses herself to attend to her class monitor duties, promising she will return a little later. Relieved that the partner crisis is temporarily averted, Elna decides to pass the quiet time by brainstorming goods to deliver to Faden. She contemplates changing her usual embroidery patterns, recalling that bright star motifs have recently become quite popular in the capital. Without warning, someone violently shoves her from behind, causing her to cry out in sheer surprise. The cruel bully from earlier sharply corners her, gloating that she finally caught Elna while the impudent commoner wasn't around. Sneering maliciously, the girl challenges Elna to see exactly how long she can hold out on her own against their coordinated harassment. Elna slowly rubs her aching arm and calmly addresses the girl as Ribba, politely asking what this self-proclaimed leader wants with her. Ribba explodes in absolute fury, screaming that she had a terrible time and fiercely demanding to know how Elna dared to deceive her. Furious tears of humiliation prick Ribba's eyes as she reveals her group was severely reprimanded for falsely calling the prince Granat based on Elna's vicious lie. The mean noble girls aggressively question if Elna is truly claiming that His Highness asked a lowly country noble to use his first name. The lead bully sneers and demands to know why a prince would ever need to do something so completely absurd. Pushing closer to their target, the girls ruthlessly accuse Elna of wasting His Highness's precious time and causing endless trouble. Raising a hand menacingly, the leader declares she will not be lenient with her any longer. Suddenly, Elna gasps in shock as a commanding presence forcefully interrupts the escalating situation. Prince Granat steps into view, coldly finishing the bully's sentence by asking who exactly they are planning to punish. Glaring sharply at the stunned instigators, he demands to know if there is a problem happening in the hallway. The offending nobles instantly freeze in sheer panic at the sudden, terrifying appearance of royalty. Desperately bowing to the prince, the bullies grow severely flustered at being caught in such an unacceptable act. Trembling under his intense gaze, the girls hastily assure the prince that absolutely nothing is wrong. Unmoved by their lies, Granat firmly declares he was the one who originally spoke to Lady Elna and icily orders the bullies to leave immediately. Panicking wildly, the girls frantically excuse themselves and sprint away from the prince's wrath. With the immediate threat gone, Granat turns his attention back to Elna as his harsh demeanor softens completely. Sighing in deep relief, Elna bows respectfully and sincerely thanks His Highness for stepping in to save her. Granat quickly waves off her gratitude, sincerely apologizing for causing the dangerous misunderstanding in the first place. Still completely baffled by the prince's unusual actions, Elna stares blankly and internally questions what is actually going on. Stepping forward smoothly, Granat kindly offers to help carry the heavy stack of notebooks in her arms. Flustered by his royal assistance, Elna quickly insists that she can manage the heavy load all by herself. Ignoring her polite refusal, he smoothly compromises by forcefully taking at least half of the notebooks from her grasp. Admiring his genuine kindness, Elna silently contemplates the confusing mystery surrounding his relentless attempts to make her say his name. Unable to hold back her burning curiosity any longer, she finally asks His Highness directly why he insists on her calling him by his first name. Granat stares at her silently, a complex mix of heavy emotions swirling within his deep garnet eyes. Lowering his gaze, he apologizes and admits he finally realizes how incredibly difficult his request was for her to fulfill in front of others. He softly confesses that he carelessly placed a massive burden on her shoulders without thinking the situation through. Closing the physical distance between them, he leans in close and softly asks if it would be okay when they are completely alone. Staring deeply into her eyes, he passionately admits that he simply wants to hear his name spoken in her beautiful voice without anyone bothering them. Flashing a breathtaking smile, Granat confesses that he wants nothing more than to be alone with her. Overwhelmed by his nation-toppling beauty, Elna practically short-circuits as her racing heart and nasal mucosa enter a state of absolute emergency. Watching her panic, Granat realizes he missed his perfect chance to investigate her magic but feels utterly compelled to help her regardless. Desperately breaking the romantic tension, Elna frantically stammers and asks if his request is an official royal order. Regaining her composure slightly, she rigidly vows that she will immediately obey if he formally commands it. Startled by her robotic obedience, Granat looks dejected and sadly notes that he has only managed to trouble her once again. Seizing the opening, Elna loudly excuses herself and completely flees the scene under the guise of hastily delivering the notebooks. Escaping around the corner, she sighs in sheer relief while terrified by the overwhelming magical power of his devastatingly handsome face. Suddenly, Lily appears from the shadows, casually remarking that she never expected His Highness to personally ride to Elna's rescue. Deeply embarrassed, Elna asks if Lily saw the whole thing, to which the heroine sheepishly admits she accidentally watched the dramatic encounter unfold. Smiling softly at the flustered noble, Lily gracefully excuses herself to head back to the classroom. Meanwhile, Theodore approaches a conflicted Granat in the hallway, carefully asking if the prince has finally noticed the truth. Confused by the vague question, Granat stares at Theodore and asks what exactly he was supposed to notice about himself. Shaking his head in quiet amusement, Theodore simply thanks Granat for helping Lady Elna and brushes off the cryptic remark. As Theodore walks away, he silently wonders why Granat simply could not issue a royal order, leaving the prince alone to ponder his own complicated feelings. Granat reflected on his spontaneous remark, wondering what true meaning lay behind his unintentional request for Elna to speak his name. He recalled freezing in place while gazing deeply into the clear aquamarine eyes of a seemingly ordinary girl. His sharp instinct sensed her mysterious power, convincing him that hearing her call his name would reveal her true nature. Trembling slightly, Elna promised she would obey if he gave her a direct order. Acknowledging he could have simply commanded her, Granat admitted he stubbornly refused to take that easy path. His expression softened as he confessed he simply did not want her to dislike him. Snapping back to the present, Theo criticized Granat for being too honest, noting he originally just asked why the prince kept greeting Lady Elna. Theo mentally sighed at the massive miscalculation, realizing the completely oblivious prince clearly harbored genuine feelings for the girl. Staring off into the distance, Granat lost himself in swirling thoughts of his deepening affection. His mind raced with intense desires, desperately wanting to touch her glossy hair and discover how she spent her holidays. Meanwhile, a cheerful Elna arrived at a local shop to deliver her latest batch of handmade goods. The ecstatic shopkeeper thanked her profusely, revealing that her previously delivered Gluck handkerchiefs had completely sold out and become a massive hit. Handing over the new items, Elna internally credited her intense stress for fueling the day and night embroidery sessions meant to ward off unpleasantness. The shopkeeper enthusiastically admired the new star embroidery, praising the incredibly cute design. Surprised that the items weren't heading to the display floor, Elna confirmed the delivery of 8 precise pieces. The shopkeeper explained the overwhelming demand, noting that buyers were already predetermined for every single highly coveted item. Rumors claimed these cleansing handkerchiefs warded off illness and cancelled unwanted marriage interviews, drawing relentless noble messengers to the store. Elna nodded in quiet understanding, realizing countless desperate nobles likely wanted a magical excuse to break off their engagements. Overjoyed by the booming business, the shopkeeper promised to reward Elna with an extra special, large bonus. Leaving the shop, Elna felt incredibly grateful for the generous service reward, which included the slightly expensive red No. 39 thread. Planning her next lucrative project, she decided to embroider fruit patterns and immediately bring them straight to Phaedon. An elegant voice suddenly cut through the bustling street, politely asking the young girl to wait. A beautiful stranger approached with an air of desperation, inquiring if Elna knew the way to a shop called Phaedon. Eager to assist, Elna brightly confirmed the location was nearby and happily offered to guide her there. Observing the woman's simple yet perfectly tailored dress, Elna immediately suspected she was a high-ranking noble lady traveling incognito. The stranger expressed profound gratitude for the quick help, admitting she lacked time and desperately needed to buy something specific. Connecting the obvious dots, Elna asked if the elegant woman was searching for the famous Gluck cleansing handkerchiefs. The woman's face tightened with desperate hope, praying that securing just one handkerchief might finally give her a fighting chance. Shocked that such a dignified person needed protection against bad things, Elna wondered what terrible circumstances had driven her here. Hesitantly, Elna broke the unfortunate news, informing the disappointed woman that the cleansing handkerchiefs were currently completely sold out. Reaching into her own belongings, Elna generously offered her personal Gluck handkerchief to the devastated stranger. The woman hesitated to take the personal item, but Elna firmly insisted she could easily visit the shop anytime. Empathizing deeply with the stranger's hidden struggles, Elna silently vowed to help if a single embroidered cloth could save the woman's feelings. Moved entirely by the genuine kindness, the noblewoman gracefully accepted the offered gift. Clasping the protective fabric tightly to her chest, she offered her absolute truest, most heartfelt thanks. A sharp voice suddenly shattered the quiet moment as a young man rushed up, visibly relieved to have finally found his sister. The woman proudly showed her brother the prized handkerchief, explaining how the kind stranger gifted it after the shop sold out. The protective brother immediately offered to pay, but a highly flustered Elna refused the money and insisted the cloth wasn't expensive. Anxious to escape the rapidly escalating royal attention, Elna awkwardly excused herself and practically sprinted away. Sprinting down the alleyway, she panicked over the close call, terrified that interacting with nobles would expose her secret hustle to her strict older brother. The scene opens on a quiet moment before an inevitable and serious confrontation takes place. Pondering the escalating situation, a solitary figure decides it is finally time to address the pressing issue head-on. Returning to the safety of her home, Elna warmly greets her brother and announces her arrival. Her brother immediately stops her in her tracks, asking if now is a good time to discuss an important matter. Noting the perfect timing, she asks Franz to prepare tea so she can also bring up a pressing question of her own. Sitting down together, Elna apologizes for the delay and explains that the handkerchiefs she put on consignment are selling unexpectedly well. Her brother assures her that he trusts her judgment completely, while she clarifies she never used the Newman family name for the sales. Shifting the tone, he gravely reveals that the wild rumors surrounding her Gluck cleansing handkerchiefs are spreading much further than she realizes. Anxious about the unexpected attention, Elna nervously asks if she can continue selling them as long as it causes no trouble for their family. Instead of answering her directly, her brother leans in and intently asks if she has any recently made handkerchiefs on hand. Reaching into her belongings, Elna carefully presents the single embroidered handkerchief she currently has with her. Finding none in his own possession, her brother urgently asks if any remaining stock from the Territory Festival can be tracked down. Thinking back to the festival, Elna suggests that their mother or the maids back at the Territory Mansion might still possess one. Without wasting a single second, her brother sharply calls out for their loyal servants Franz and Sophie. He decisively orders them to arrange an immediate carriage trip to the Territory, ensuring he can return as swiftly as possible. Brushing off Elna's desire to accompany him, he firmly reminds her of her academy duties and assures her that Franz will stay behind to protect her. Laying down strict rules for her safety, he entirely forbids her from making handkerchiefs alone and mandates that Sophie must accompany her to the shop. He severely restricts her daily movements, ordering her to restrain her embroidery habits and completely avoid going out until his return. The vigilant servants immediately chime in, confirming that they will be guarding her closely during his prolonged absence. Demanding her absolute compliance, her brother forces a shocked Elna to reluctantly agree to his suffocating terms. Left completely alone with her thoughts, Elna sighs heavily, lamenting that her handkerchief embroidery was her only reliable outlet for stress. Desperate for relief, she obsessively embroiders a single cloth until it is covered, feeling utterly strange, creating completely useless items. With her primary coping mechanism stripped away, the mounting stress violently pushes her dangerously close to her absolute breaking point. Several miserable days pass under Leon's strict confinement, leaving her completely trapped and unable to venture out alone. Letting out an exhausted sigh, she instructs Sophie to accompany her to the shop after classes to sort out the ongoing delivery situation. Heading back to school, she silently prays for an incident-free day so she can swiftly return home and handle her business. Her fragile peace is instantly shattered when Theo loudly calls out her name in the crowded academy hallway. Adding to the overwhelming morning, Lily quickly approaches with a bright smile and cheerfully wishes Lady Elna a good morning. The hostile noble girls aggressively corner her once again, demanding she prepare herself for their ruthless wrath. Overwhelmed by the relentless social chaos, Elna spirals into pure frustration with absolutely nowhere to vent her bubbling anger. Brushing off Lily's genuine concern about her health, Elna forces a weak excuse and quickly attempts to flee the area. Before she can escape to Faden to handle her shop duties, Prince Granat suddenly intercepts her and firmly asks for a moment of her time. Reluctantly following the prince despite her tight schedule, she notes his unusual silence and asks if he plans to force her to say his name again. Granat smoothly dismisses the awkward topic, prompting Elna to assume he wants to discuss Lily, which he subtly confirms. Internally rationalizing his romantic interest in the heroine, Elna desperately wishes the two main characters would just get together and leave her alone. Granat leans in closely and questions Elna about the wild rumors regarding Lily's supposedly extraordinary magical power. Baffled by his entirely unromantic interrogation, Elna confusedly asks if he plans to inquire about Lily's favorite food or flowers instead. Ignoring her question completely, Granat shifts his intense focus to the rumored cleansing handkerchiefs, causing Elna to stammer nervously. He explains that these mysterious items are said to ward off bad things, noting that such a power would make his dire situation significantly easier. Staring directly at her, he solemnly confesses that having a companion with such incredible power would drastically reduce his danger and finally bring him relief. Refusing to accept his logic about relying on Lily's amazing magical power, Elna fiercely questions the morality of becoming companions simply because it is the easy way out. Staring him down, she firmly declares that a peaceful life obtained through such lazy convenience holds absolutely zero inherent value. Passionately condemning his mindset, she argues that a person must actively fight to protect what is truly important instead of pushing the burden onto someone else. Urging the calm and kind-hearted prince to abandon his pessimistic premise of inevitable misfortune, she begs him to build confidence and actively pursue his own happiness. Overwhelmed by her passionate and sudden outburst, the prince simply stands frozen in stunned, wide-eyed silence. Instantly regretting her emotional explosion, a thoroughly stressed Elna curses her own lack of restraint and frantically excuses herself from the room. Fleeing down the corridor, she mentally kicks herself for missing the perfect private opportunity to finally call him by his name. Consumed by sudden guilt over her dramatic exit, she halts her retreat and decides she must go right back to properly apologize to him. Turning the corner to find him, she stops dead in her tracks upon witnessing a quiet moment unfolding between the prince and the heroine. Observing the event from the shadows, she realizes with a heavy heart that the game's official romantic scenario is progressing perfectly without her. Trying desperately to convince herself that her role in the story is finally over, she struggles to understand the hollow, painful feelings suddenly blooming in her chest. The scene opened in silence as a tense atmosphere hung heavily over the completely quiet surroundings. Gasping wildly for breath, Elna leaned heavily against a brick wall as she desperately tried to calm her racing heart. She realized with sudden clarity that she had blindly sprinted away from the chaotic scene without even understanding her own frantic reasoning. A strange sensation washed over her as she wondered if the game's forced scenario was actively keeping everyone away to perfectly isolate the main characters. Clutching her aching head in absolute disbelief, she blamed her unusually bold outburst entirely on the immense stress of not being able to embroider. A heavy wave of profound dread hit her as she recognized that her deeply impulsive behavior was completely and utterly disrespectful. Suddenly remembering her crucial afternoon errand, she gasped aloud and realized she urgently needed to visit the Faden shop. She hesitated momentarily in the street, recalling strict instructions demanding she only go out accompanied by Sophie after the day's bizarre events. Rationalizing her incredibly risky solo mission, she decided Sophie would simply forgive her later since heading home first would guarantee the shop closed before she arrived. The shop's cheerful doorbell chimed loudly as she quickly pushed her way inside to successfully complete her urgent delivery. Stepping back out into the fading sunlight, she let out a long, exhausted sigh as the heavy weight of her secret responsibilities settled over her. She felt a sharp twinge of guilt remembering the shopkeeper's profound sadness upon hearing she couldn't make deliveries for a while, though they kindly promised to wait. Their genuine dedication deeply warmed her anxious heart, powerfully reaffirming her own strong desire to continue creating countless beautiful embroidered pieces. Hoping to safely resume her craft once her brother Leon returned from his territory trip, she decided to take a dangerous shortcut through the darkening streets. Paranoia fiercely gripped her as she feared that impending punishment for disrespecting the prince might result in her total, inescapable confinement starting tomorrow. Despite Granat's obvious kindness, she sternly reminded herself that his high royal status placed him in a completely different world she desperately needed to avoid. Her frantic internal monologue violently shattered when a strange, menacing voice suddenly called out to block her forward path. A grimy street thug sneered menacingly from the shadows, aggressively suggesting the pretty lady stick around to keep them company for a little while. Panic spiked dangerously through her veins as she cursed her own carelessness, suddenly realizing her pristine academy uniform practically screamed that she was a wealthy, vulnerable noble. She shrieked in absolute terror when two more menacing thugs suddenly emerged from the dark alleyway to completely box her in. The thugs tightened their dangerous, suffocating circle around her, mockingly warning their terrified prey not to make them work too hard. Smirking with cruel, absolute confidence, the gang leader proudly declared that absolutely no one would hear her desperate screams in such a deserted back alley. Frantically searching for an immediate escape, she suddenly remembered a brilliant psychological trick from her past life in Japan regarding bystanders completely ignoring generic cries for help. Utilizing this clever tactic, she filled her lungs completely and desperately screamed at the top of her lungs that there was a massive fire. The thugs violently grabbed her to brutally stifle her clever cries, leaving her struggling weakly and begging for anyone to save her. A sudden, sickening thud loudly echoed through the dark alley as one of her brutal attackers was violently struck down right before her wide eyes. A familiar blonde figure dramatically descended like a furious storm, unleashing a devastating physical strike that sent another attacker flying backward into the dirt. Prince Granat quickly rushed to her side with a look of frantic desperation, urgently demanding to know if she was injured. Stunned totally speechless by her sudden royal savior, she stared wide-eyed and immediately reflexively began to address him by his formal title. He swiftly silenced her with a fierce, commanding gaze, warning her that using his title would instantly expose his royal identity to the dangerous street criminals. The remaining thugs slowly recovered from the sudden, violent ambush, groaning in intense pain as they furiously cursed the blonde interloper. Mocking his refined, elegant appearance, the thugs cruelly taunted the prince by questioning what a delicate pretty boy noble could possibly accomplish in a real fight. While Granat fiercely faced down the angry thugs, a dark, incredibly ominous figure silently materialized right behind the completely distracted Elna. An icy, terrifyingly familiar voice pierced the tense alley air, causing Elna's entire body to freeze in absolute terror. She turned her head incredibly slowly to find her incredibly strict bodyguard Sophie glaring down at her with terrifying, murderous intensity. Radiating pure, unadulterated fury, Sophie promised with a cold smile that she would hear a full, detailed explanation for this dangerous stunt later. Trembling pitifully under Sophie's demonic glare, Elna completely broke down internally and silently concluded that successfully getting kidnapped would have actually been much safer. Desperate to instantly regain control of the failing situation, one of the bleeding thugs lunged aggressively and furiously attempted to use Elna as a helpless human shield. Granat's bright eyes burned with sudden, furious rage as he ordered the filthy criminal to immediately release his tight grip on her. Caught totally helpless in the terrifying crossfire between furious royals, angry bodyguards, and desperate thugs, Elna could only let out a weak whimper of utter defeat. A brutal strike lands on the enemy, forcing a pained gasp as a voice commands an immediate follow-up attack. Bursting onto the scene, Theo frantically calls out to Elna to check if she is safe. Theo sighs in deep relief for arriving just in time, while Elna internally panics over accidentally using his real name again. Turning his attention to the tense royal, Theo firmly advises His Highness to calm down as well. Acknowledging the advice, Granat nods curtly while Elna stares at him in shock, having never seen such an intense expression on his face before. Stepping closer with deep concern, Granat gently calls her name and asks if she suffered any injuries. His gaze softening, he offers a sincere apology and laments that he could not reach her side sooner. A heavy silence falls between them as she processes the raw, uncharacteristic vulnerability in the prince's demeanor. Gripping her chest, she wonders why her heart is pounding so frantically before a sudden realization hits her. She desperately scolds herself for nearly falling for him, blaming her racing pulse entirely on the dangerous suspension bridge effect. Brushing off her concern about his missing coat, Granat insists she keep it to avoid catching a chill. He explains that he was originally on his way to apologize to her, having enlisted Theo to guide him directly to her residence. Discovering she was missing, they followed a lead to Faden and sprinted over just in time to hear her terrified scream. Overwhelmed by gratitude, she bows her head and apologizes profusely for causing the entire dangerous situation. Shaking his head, he takes full responsibility and apologizes for previously saying such thoughtless and pathetic things to her. Refusing to let him take the blame, she humbly apologizes for speaking completely out of turn and forgetting her own noble position. Interrupting the emotional exchange, Theo announces it is time to go home while promising to drag the unconscious thugs to the proper authorities. Prompted by both Theo and the prince, Elna finally agrees to leave the dangerous alleyway behind. Before she can walk away, Granat catches her attention and gently requests that they talk again alone sometime. Flustered by the intimate invitation, she enthusiastically agrees to his royal request. As he seals their promise with a warm smile, Elna completely misinterprets his romantic interest as a desire to discuss Lily for future game events. Shifting back to strict brotherly mode, Theo demands to inspect her injuries before they discuss anything else. Swatting away her attempts to undress herself, Theo sternly warns her not to aggravate her injuries by moving awkwardly. Noting that the bruises on her right hand will make movement difficult, he angrily demands to know why she foolishly visited the shop entirely alone. Shrinking under his intense scolding, she stammers and struggles to find a valid excuse for her reckless behavior. Admitting her foolishness, she apologizes for letting her guard down because she was so used to handling things by herself. Stepping forward to take the blame, Sophie firmly insists that it was her sole duty to protect her lady. Despite Elna desperately trying to absolve her of any guilt, the loyal maid bows deeply and issues a profound apology. Swearing to never repeat the mistake, Sophie promises to meticulously guard Elna during every single academy commute. Changing the subject, Sophie shoots her lady a highly suspicious and curious glance. Leaning in closely, the maid slyly asks if His Highness summoned Elna for a romantic rendezvous. Backing up her scandalous theory, Sophie points out that the prince explicitly asked to speak with her alone just moments ago. Completely caught off guard by the bold accusation, Elna blushes furiously at the very idea of a royal date. Frantically waving her hands in denial, she attempts to rebrand the intimate invitation as a simple debriefing session. She weakly explains that her pent-up frustration caused a perfectly normal conversation about Lily to take an incredibly weird turn. The tense interrogation is suddenly interrupted as another frantic voice calls out to check on Elna's well-being. A stern guard arrives to confirm he heard the grim report from Theodore and vows to immediately inform Sir Leon Hort. Pouting over her bruised hand, Elna complains she could have slapped the thugs if she was not injured, prompting a dry agreement from the guard. Returning from his task, Theo casually mentions dropping the thugs off at the Royal Guard, completely shocking Elna with the severe escalation. Dropping a massive bombshell, Theo gravely reveals that His Highness is actively being targeted by dangerous enemies. Explaining the fierce battle over royal succession between Prince Granat and the First Prince, the guard notes that assassination attempts had recently calmed down since he took the job. Questioning the alleged danger to his life, Elna defensively argues that she was merely accosted in a random capital back alley. Her brother interrupts the denial, pointing out a crucial connection involving the mysterious Gluck handkerchiefs. Feigning ignorance about the handkerchiefs, Elna quickly deflects the conversation by asking Franz when their brother Leon is scheduled to return. Franz informs her that Leon will return in 2 days, strictly confining her to the house and absolutely forbidding any more handkerchief making until then. Reluctantly agreeing to the house arrest, Elna admits to her brother that she finally spoke with the prince regarding Lily. Feeling a deep debt of gratitude toward the prince for saving her, she resolves to at least help him and Lily grow closer. When asked if she and His Highness are in a romantic relationship, Elna visibly shudders and begs him never to make such a terrifying joke again. Wrapping up the meeting, her disguised brother announces his return to the prince's side as they exchange final cautions regarding a secret request. Watching Theodore leave, Elna worries about his exhausted appearance, only for her companion to cryptically suggest that someone else entirely deserves her pity. Letting out a long, heavy breath, Elna slumped forward in deep exhaustion. She mentally replayed the terrifying thug attack from the previous night, lamenting how the ban on her precious embroidery left her completely unable to gather her chaotic thoughts. Blushing furiously, she admitted that Prince Granat's rescue left a lingering suspension bridge effect, finding his striking face completely unfair. Her expression darkened as she recalled Theo's serious warning that someone was actively targeting the prince. Overwhelmed by the escalating royal drama, she weakly confessed that she just didn't understand any of it. Elsewhere, Theo smoothly approached Lily and politely asked if she had a moment to spare. Getting straight to the point, he asked the heroine what she personally thought of Prince Granat. Looking genuinely confused by the sudden question, Lily blinked innocently and admitted she didn't think anything in particular. Smiling slyly, Theo casually dropped the massive bombshell that Elna believed Lily was a perfect match for the prince. Lily's eyes went wide with pure shock as she repeated Elna's name in total disbelief. Watching her bewildered reaction, Theo mentally noted how painfully obvious the romantic tension actually was. He shuddered slightly at the realization, finding it absolutely terrifying that both main characters were so completely oblivious to their own feelings. The next morning, Theo casually wished Elna a good morning as they crossed paths in the academy. After the school bell rang, Elna trudged away miserably, complaining about the sheer boredom of heading straight home without her beloved embroidery. A sudden, sharp voice violently shattered her peaceful departure and made her gasp in absolute shock. The haughty Lady Liber aggressively cornered her, loudly accusing Elna of being the scandalous noble lady surrounded by men in town last night. Sweating nervously, Elna ironically noted that she was currently the one being completely surrounded by a hostile crowd. Realizing the immense danger, she firmly resolved to play dumb, knowing it would be a disaster if the bullies discovered the prince was involved. Feigning absolute ignorance, she tilted her head and innocently asked the aggressive leader if something had happened the previous night. The furious bullies glared sharply at her blatant evasion, refusing to back down. Snapping viciously, Liber destroyed Elna's alibi by loudly declaring they had an eyewitness to the entire shameful event. Elna visibly flinched as the undeniable accusation struck its mark perfectly. The cruel girls ruthlessly shamed her for wandering at night and fraternizing with men, mockingly wondering how Prince Granat would react to such scandalous behavior. A powerful, regal voice suddenly cut through the vicious bullying, firmly stating that there was absolutely nothing wrong with Lady Elna. Liber instantly changed her tune and fawned over the arriving prince, insisting he didn't need to lie just to protect such a disgraceful girl. Emboldened by her own malice, she arrogantly claimed that a woman who wandered at night was far too audacious to ever enter His Highness's sight. Elna mentally groaned at the massive hassle, desperate to keep Granat completely separated from her dirty street scandal. Glaring with icy royal fury, Granat bluntly declared Liber's cruel words to be deeply offensive. Shattering the entire social hierarchy, he proudly announced to the crowd that he and Lady Elna were actually together last night. A heavy, absolute silence instantly paralyzed the completely stunned onlookers. Panic exploded in Elna's mind as she screamed internally, furious that the prince would expose their secret after she tried so hard to cover it up. Scrambling to salvage the disaster, she loudly lied to the crowd that their meeting was a total coincidence caused by a broken carriage. Closing the distance instantly, Granat leaned in dangerously close and smoothly whispered that they shouldn't tell lies. Elna let out a flustered squeak as his overwhelming proximity completely short-circuited her panicked brain. Watching from the sidelines, Theo quickly decided he needed to step in before the romantic tension caused a complete public meltdown. Smoothly interrupting the intimate moment, Theo urgently reminded the prince that they really needed to get going. Granat reluctantly agreed, softly instructing Elna to let him know the very moment she needed anything. Watching his retreating back, Elna remained utterly baffled as to why a royal wouldn't actively want to hide a scandalous late-night rendezvous. Lily suddenly appeared beside her like a rescuing angel, urgently whispering that they should escape while the bullies were still distracted. Snapping out of their absolute shock, the furious noble girls immediately screamed for Elna to wait. Hostile noble girls aggressively corner Elna, demanding to know if she was really surrounded by men and questioning her fundamental virtue. Surrounded by the relentless whispers, Elna sighs in utter annoyance and wonders if she really has to endure this baseless gossip. The lead bully glares down at her target, sharply demanding an explanation for Elna's dismissive and silent attitude. Suddenly, a sharp voice calls out for Lady Mises, instantly freezing the hostile bullies in their tracks. The bullies quickly turn and enthusiastically beg Lady Mises to step in and teach the commoner her proper place. To everyone's sheer shock, Lady Mises sternly rebukes the bullies for making unladylike accusations and dares them to doubt Prince Granat's own words. Panicking under the fierce royal reprimand, the terrified girls frantically excuse themselves and sprint down the hallway. Breathing a sigh of relief, Elna awkwardly thanks the imposing noblewoman for stepping in to save her from the harassment. Watching the retreating girls, Lady Mises calmly remarks that the leader might seem intense but is ultimately a sincere and kind person. Elna silently marvels at the fierce Lady Mises, completely captivated by the older girl's striking and undeniable beauty. Recognizing Adelina as the story's inevitable rival, Elna acknowledges the tragic plot force dictating that Prince Granat will fall in love with Lily instead. Despite the forced narrative of the game, Elna genuinely hopes that this beautiful noblewoman can eventually find her own happy ending. Suddenly cutting through her internal monologue, Lady Mises smoothly asks Lily if she might borrow Elna for a brief moment. Elna points to herself in utter confusion as Lady Mises clarifies that she has a specific question to ask her privately. Not wanting to cause any trouble, Lily gracefully steps back and grants the noblewoman permission to take her friend away. Bidding a polite farewell, Lily leaves the scene as Lady Mises prepares to escort Elna to a more secure location. Gesturing with elegant grace, the imposing lady asks Elna to follow her so they can speak without prying eyes. The two girls walk together in tense, heavy silence through the grand, sunlit halls of the academy. Arriving at a secluded sitting area, the noblewoman officially introduces herself as Adelina Mises and suggests they talk there. Elna politely introduces herself in return, noting internally that they already knew each other's names without the formal pleasantries. Sitting across from her, Elna finds herself utterly distracted by Lady Adelina's scandalous and breathtakingly mature figure. Adelina gracefully takes a seat and thanks her, fully aware of the intense scrutiny her presence commands. Gathering her courage, Elna looks directly at Lady Adelina and bluntly asks if she is actually Prince Granat's official fiancée. Adelina immediately shuts down the circulating rumor, stating firmly that the assumption is completely incorrect. She explains that while their family's high standing and childhood interactions cause people to view her as his future wife, there are no actual engagement plans. Realizing Adelina is Lily's biggest romantic rival, Elna cautiously asks what business the imposing noblewoman has with her. Adelina's expression darkens as she brings up a disturbing rumor claiming Lord Theo was seen leaving the Newman residence last night. Sweating bullets, Elna quickly covers for her disguised brother, firmly claiming that only her sibling and an apprentice butler came or went. Staring intently, Adelina coldly accepts the excuse, though her sharp gaze suggests she remains highly suspicious of the story. A sudden, dramatic shift in Adelina's typically stern demeanor catches Elna completely off guard. Connecting the dots, Elna leans in close and boldly asks if Lady Adelina is secretly interested in Lord Theo romantically. Adelina flusters instantly and frantically denies the ridiculous accusation, while Elna marvels at the adorable gap between her fierce reputation and current panic. Blushing fiercely, Adelina struggles desperately to regain her composure as her stern, unyielding facade completely crumbles. She jealously points out that Lord Theo called Elna by her first name, prompting Elna to frantically assure her that nothing is going on between them. Regaining her fierce loyalty, Adelina aggressively defends Theo's honor, passionately declaring that he would never do something so scandalous. Smiling knowingly at the outburst, Elna teases the flustered noblewoman by pointing out that her fierce defense is absolute proof of true love. Utterly humiliated and unable to handle the accurate teasing, Adelina angrily bids her a good day and storms off. Watching her retreat, Elna shakes her head and jokingly condemns her brother Theo for being a sinful man, noting they might make a surprisingly good match. She silently resolves that if the day ever comes when they can safely reveal Theo's true identity, she would love to actively support their romance. Just as she finally relaxes her guard, a familiar voice suddenly calls out her name and makes her jump in sheer surprise. Approaching the lush courtyard, Elna calls out to Lily and asks if she is watering the plants, prompting a delighted greeting from the young lady. Smiling brightly, Lily confirms that she is happily assisting the gardener with the daily chores. Admiring her grace, Elna internally marvels at Lily's picture-perfect beauty, concluding that her flawless personality and immense magical power make her the ultimate heroine. A quiet moment passes as Elna continues to silently observe the elegant girl tending to the blooming flowers. Assuming the romantic scenario must be progressing since Lily and the prince grew close off-screen, Elna decides to gently probe for juicy details. Leaning in with burning curiosity, Elna explicitly asks the heroine what she genuinely thinks of Prince Granat. Casually stating she has no particular feelings for him, Lily leaves an utterly shocked Elna scrambling to ask if she is interested in someone else instead. Stunned that all potential love interests seem to have been entirely shot down, Elna internally laments her lack of knowledge regarding the game's actual capture targets. Connecting the dots, A sudden look of realization washes over Elna as she remembers Lord Theo's earlier cryptic warnings. Breaking the brief silence with quiet determination, Lily looks directly at Elna and declares her ultimate dream of becoming a government official. Explaining her purely pragmatic mindset, Lily clarifies that while royal recognition would benefit her future career, she harbors absolutely zero romantic feelings for the prince. Thrilled by this wonderful ambition, Elna eagerly offers her full support, bringing immense joy to Lily, who admits she is usually mocked for her unconventional dreams. Overwhelmed by the genuine encouragement, a blushing Lily sincerely confesses her deep affection for Elna. Promising to explain a sudden bandage on her arm later, an embarrassed Lily hastily excuses herself to return the watering tools before Elna can press further. Standing alone in the courtyard, Elna spirals into confusion as she questions how the story can possibly progress if the heroine outright refuses to fall in love. Caught in a frustrating web of anxiety, Elna struggles to decipher the unpredictable nature of this world. The scene opened on a quiet, uncertain moment as a young woman found herself confined in unfamiliar surroundings. Gazing around the elegant room, Elna wondered where she was and admitted the strange situation was deeply troubling. Observing the lavish decor and opulent furniture, she speculated that she had been brought to a wealthy noble's private estate. A heavy wave of disbelief washed over her as she realized the massive gravity of her situation, completely stunned that she had actually been kidnapped. Analyzing her recent capture, she noted that the person who grabbed her didn't seem to actively want to cause her any physical harm. She logically deduced that the girl was likely just a pawn tasked with removing her from the academy since a getaway carriage was conveniently prepared. Piecing the strange clues together, she realized a hidden mastermind was powerfully pulling the strings behind the scenes. Frantically considering hidden motives, she wondered if her captors mistook her for Lady Lily or if a jealous noble misunderstood her relationship with her brother Theo. Recalling the classic kidnapping event from her past life's game, she strongly suspected they had grabbed the completely wrong target for such a cliché plot point. Her racing internal monologue instantly shattered as a sudden, polite voice warmly thanked her for waiting. A servant formally stepped forward and loudly announced the grand arrival of Lady Bianca to the captive girl. Stepping gracefully into the light, the mysterious mastermind smiled warmly and expressed her immense relief at finally meeting Elna. She dramatically addressed the bewildered captive by the legendary and highly coveted title of the Rainbow Saintess. Elna stared in completely stunned silence, utterly blindsided by the absurd and overwhelmingly grand accusation. Meanwhile, Lily hurried frantically through the academy grounds, anxious to return to Lady Elna after taking way too long to put away a watering can. A frantic, terrified voice suddenly echoed through the peaceful courtyard, screaming that something absolutely terrible had just happened. Lily quickly intercepted Lady Adelina to ask what was wrong, only for the panicked noble to desperately demand Prince Granat's exact location. Trembling violently with panic, Adelina loudly revealed that the Viscount's daughter, Elna Newman, had been forcibly kidnapped. Pure shock rocked Lily to her very core as she struggled to comprehend who on earth would brazenly commit such a dangerous crime. Adelina quickly explained she found a weeping student who confessed to being mercilessly threatened into helping facilitate the abduction. Lily immediately suggested interrogating the crying student for critical details, but Adelina fiercely interrupted to prioritize a much more urgent task. The frantic noblewoman fiercely insisted they had to find Prince Granat immediately before the situation devolved into an unsalvageable disaster. Sensing an incredible amount of hidden political danger, Lily sharply asked if Adelina already knew the culprit's true identity. Noting the Duke's daughter's sheer terror, Lily deduced the mastermind possessed such massive societal status that only the royal prince could safely intervene. Resolving to help instantly, Lily firmly agreed to hunt for the prince while desperately praying for Elna's continued safety. Back at the hidden estate, Bianca smoothly offered her captives some fresh tea, noting how surprising the sudden invitation must have been. Chuckling softly to herself, the elegant captor assured Elna that the warm beverage was completely free of any dangerous poisons. Elna firmly rejected the offered drink by politely citing her injured arm, prompting a dramatic sigh of total disappointment from the mysterious woman. Dropping all pleasantries instantly, Elna boldly demanded to know her captor's true identity and the actual reason for her abrupt abduction. The intense confrontation briefly unsettled Elna as she felt a sudden, terrifying shift in the room's previously calm atmosphere. Smiling with absolute regal authority, the elegant woman proudly introduced herself as Bianca Hares. Recognizing the highly exclusive royal surname, Elna quickly deduced that this powerful woman must be the king's royal consort since the queen had already passed away. Waving off the highly formal title, Bianca insisted on being called by her first name and casually referred to herself as a mere saintess. Elna groaned internally about oblivious royals constantly demanding first-name basis, silently begging her powerful captor to exercise some basic social restraint. Regaining her strict composure, Elna firmly stated that she must have been mistaken for this legendary saintess and questioned the true purpose of the meeting. Dismissing the firm denial entirely, Bianca confidently held up a familiar embroidered item and correctly identified the Viscount's daughter as its true creator. Recognizing her own detailed handiwork, Elna openly admitted to making the embroidered handkerchief while nervously asking if there was a problem with it. The royal consort smiled brightly, quickly reassuring the captive girl that there was absolutely no problem with the flawless creation. Bianca carefully explained that crafting such a magnificent, purifying item served as undeniable proof of immense sacred magic. Leaning in with terrifying certainty, Bianca fiercely declared that Elna was secretly the legendary Rainbow Saintess all along. Elna stares in absolute bewilderment as the absurd title of Rainbow Saintess echoes in the tense air. Visibly confused, she cautiously asks for clarification, prompting her imposing captor to sneer and aggressively question if she is simply playing dumb. Internal panic sets in as she realizes she wasn't kidnapped by mistake, desperately wondering if crafting the handkerchief accidentally triggered the game's exclusive Saintess route. A heavy, exasperated sigh escapes the royal woman as she prepares to explain the absolute basics to her seemingly clueless prisoner. Pacing elegantly, the woman explains that magical power naturally manifests as a specific color matching its properties, with normal individuals possessing only one. She notes that wielding multiple colors is exceptionally rare, and commanding all 7 marks the legendary bearer of sacred magic. Leaning in with intense gravity, she declares that these legendary saints and saintesses serve as vital, irreplaceable pillars of the kingdom. Shrinking back from the overwhelming pressure, Elna weakly protests that she absolutely does not possess that kind of supreme magical power. Unimpressed by the denial, the regal captor coldly observes that her prisoner remains completely oblivious to her own immense value. Meanwhile, Elna distractedly marvels at the royal's lavish habit of taking single sips from various freshly brewed teas throughout the interrogation. Shattering her mundane thoughts, the woman casually announces she will exempt Elna from the academy to personally groom her magical abilities under her own tutelage. Ignoring Elna's shocked confusion, the royal insists that securing the Rainbow Saintess is merely a natural step to protect the nation's cornerstone. Revealing her true ultimate goal, she commands Elna to dedicate her powers to fully supporting Prince Smaragd in the future. Frantically trying to escape the dangerous political plot, Elna argues that there are far better candidates and insists she is the wrong person entirely. Downplaying her worth as an inexperienced student who would only be a hindrance, she nervously dodges the threatening demand for her loyalty. A dark, suffocating tension immediately fills the room as the royal's gaze violently narrows in sheer displeasure. Glaring with cold suspicion, the woman sharply demands to know if Elna secretly intends to align herself with Prince Granat instead. Sweating nervously, Elna desperately stammers that she has absolutely no intention of picking sides in a vicious royal power struggle. Her mind races with wild confusion, unable to grasp why a simple embroidered handkerchief capable of easing curses has suddenly labeled her a legendary saintess. Pacing aggressively, the royal mutters that if the Rainbow Saintess backed Granat, the entire royal line of succession would be dangerously overthrown. Stopping abruptly, she delivers a chilling, absolute decree that Elna belongs exclusively to Smaragd. Without warning, a terrifying wave of physical weakness violently washes over Elna as the edges of her vision begin to blur and spin. Stumbling forward, she clutches her head in sheer panic as severe dizziness forcefully overtakes her crumbling senses. Smiling wickedly, the captor admits she laced the room with a sleeping drug just in case the sacred magic attempted to neutralize her trap. Taunting her violently fading prisoner, she mocks Elna's dense nature for failing to notice the weaponized incense burning openly in the room. Fighting the heavy fog in her mind, Elna weakly accuses her of lying while the woman promises safety in exchange for absolute obedience. Staggering under the heavy betrayal, Elna furiously realizes that every single threat, kidnapping, and lavish distraction was a meticulously planned trap. The horrifying truth suddenly clicks into place as she realizes the overwhelming variety of brewed teas was entirely meant to mask the drugged incense. Desperation utterly consumes her as she frantically searches her clouded mind for any possible avenue of escape. Amused by her pitiful struggle, the royal laughs darkly and asks if Elna truly believes she can still protect herself. Refusing to surrender, Elna rips a thick piece of fabric from her pocket to desperately cover her nose and mouth. Pressing the heavily embroidered stress relief cloth against her face, she prays its dense threads will block out the remaining toxic fumes. Watching her prisoner struggle against the poison, the royal steps forward and mockingly asks if she is finally ready to submit. Glaring with defiant, hazy eyes, Elna fiercely chokes out that she refuses to obey because she is absolutely not the saintess. Summoning the very last dregs of her fading strength, she aggressively screams her complete denial into the toxic air. A sudden blast of aggressive magical energy violently strikes Elna, leaving her stunned and utterly confused by the unprovoked assault. Startled by Elna's unexpected resilience, the royal steps back and demands to know what kind of entity she is actually dealing with. Quickly recovering her cruel composure, the woman casually brushes off the event as a simple confirmation test and openly wonders if Elna can block raw attack magic. Raising a hand crackling with dangerous energy, she viciously sneers and questions if the supposed saintess is completely defenseless against a sudden strike. Unleashing her true malice, the royal prepares to cast a lethal curse spell specifically designed to obliterate anyone lacking sacred magic. Realizing a dark curse spell is actively being prepared, a desperate voice frantically questions her fate if she truly isn't the saintess. A sinister presence coldly promises that she is about to be cursed and assures her that the ordeal will be over soon. With a sudden shout of execution, the attacker violently unleashes the terrifying magic. Knowing she will definitely be killed if she stays, the terrified victim ignores a command to wait and desperately scrambles to escape. Panting heavily, she frantically navigates the disorienting environment while desperately searching for the nearest exit. Fighting through agonizing pain, she forces her battered body to keep moving forward against all odds. Stumbling weakly, she softly begs the empty space for someone to come save her. Suddenly, her frantic momentum falters as she lets out a bewildered gasp. A stunned observer cries out in pure shock upon instantly recognizing the injured girl as Lady Elna. Completely drained of her remaining strength, Elna silently collapses to the ground. Sprinting desperately down the corridor, Lily frantically searched for Prince Granat to deliver the urgent news about Elna. Finally spotting the prince, she screamed out in absolute panic that Lady Elna had been violently kidnapped. The prince froze dead in his tracks, his eyes widening in pure shock as he numbly repeated Elna's name. Pushing through his stunned silence, Lily fiercely urged him to hurry before it was too late. Watching his frantic reaction, Lily finally realized just how deeply precious Elna truly was to the rushing prince. Despite Elna's oblivious stubbornness and the massive gap in their social status, Lily sincerely prayed the two of them could find true happiness together. Relieved to hear that the prince was already on his way, Lady Adelina let out a massive sigh but suddenly stumbled over her own feet. Before she could hit the hard stone floor, Theo suddenly appeared and smoothly caught the falling noblewoman. Blushing furiously at the sudden rescue, Adelina gazed up at Lord Theo as he calmly asked if she was all right. Questioned about why he wasn't blindly following the prince, Theo explained he needed to gather more critical information first since he already knew Granat's destination. Masking his own intense worry for Elna, Theo formally requested the full details of the kidnapping plot from Lady Adelina. As he listened to the grim situation, Theo's thoughts drifted heavily toward the furious prince rushing blindly ahead into danger. Noting his surprisingly dark expression, Adelina quietly muttered that Lord Theo was entirely too intense himself. Bursting violently into the grand building, Granat rushed toward the upper floor while desperately screaming Elna's name. A startled gasp escaped Elna's lips as the furious prince suddenly kicked the heavy ornate door wide open. Granat locked eyes with the captive girl, his fierce expression softening slightly at the miraculous sight of her. Rushing immediately to her side, he breathed a heavy sigh of absolute relief that she was finally safe. While Granat frantically checked her for injuries and lingering sleeping drugs, a highly confused Elna demanded to know where they actually were. Shock washed over Elna as Granat revealed her luxurious prison was actually the Zwei Palace, a highly restricted section of the royal grounds. Confessing his deep, overwhelming worry, the prince explained that Lady Lily was the one who tipped them off to her exact location. Apologizing quietly for causing such massive trouble, she requested to leave immediately, prompting Granat to gently escort her toward the exit. A smooth, chilling voice suddenly shattered their escape as Bianca stepped out of the shadows to intercept them. Granat immediately stepped in front of Elna, glaring at the royal consort with absolute, unyielding fury. Feigning polite innocence, the elegant woman boldly referred to the kidnapped girl as her esteemed personal guest. Granat fiercely spat back that there was absolutely nothing to return since Elna did not belong to the treacherous consort. Trembling slightly behind the prince's back, Elna finally processed the terrifying reality of facing the royal consort directly. Smirking maliciously, Bianca coldly challenged the prince by asking if the Viscount's daughter belonged to him instead. Denying the twisted accusation, Granat coldly warned the dangerous woman not to assume she could act with absolute impunity forever. Brushing off his serious threat, Bianca maliciously compared the prince to his late mother, mocking their shared habit of stealing what belonged to others. A horrific realization suddenly dawned on the prince as he slowly connected Bianca's twisted words to his mother's tragic demise. Glaring with raw, burning hatred, Granat accused the bitter consort of never truly recovering from her failure to secure the queen's throne. Bianca exploded in sudden fury, screaming that a woman of her high ducal standing was destined from birth to marry the king. She furiously blamed Lady Rose for seducing the king at the academy, forcing Bianca into the humiliating, secondary role of a mere royal consort. Gripping her pristine dress tightly, the furious woman seethed with absolute malice, blaming every single misery in her life entirely on Rose. Listening to the unhinged rant, Elna finally understood why Bianca so deeply despised her royal title, recognizing the bitter weight of a decades-long grudge. Cutting through her manic victimhood, Granat coldly demanded to know exactly why she had utilized forbidden curse magic. A deeply twisted, wicked smile slowly crept across Bianca's face as she noted with dark amusement that he already knew the ugly truth. Pacing elegantly through the grand room, she casually explained that the sinister realization had simply come to her one normal day. She gleefully confessed that the suffocating black shadow completely enveloping Rose was actually her own overflowing, easily wielded magical power. The crushing weight of the devastating truth hit Granat violently as he finally realized why his mother had mysteriously withered away right after giving birth to him. The woman screams not to take what is hers anymore, recalling how she warned Rose when the line of succession was reconsidered. She rages over how Rose shamelessly declared she hadn't stolen a single thing. A devastating blast of magic violently erupts across the entire area. The woman pants heavily in the aftermath as the dust finally settles around her. She proudly confesses that she unleashed her magic directly upon Rose as a fatal strike. Staring blankly, she coldly notes that her rival met an incredibly anticlimactic end. Elna stares in absolute horror at the murderous woman standing before her. Trembling, Elna realizes this woman feels absolutely no guilt after cursing and killing a person out of sheer jealousy. The grim realization hits Elna that His Highness's previous vulnerable words were directly tied to losing his mother to a curse. She remembers him wishing for a partner with the power to ward off evil, hoping it would finally lessen his danger and bring him peace. The murderous woman furiously recounts her humiliation when Rose retained the title of queen just to protect the young second prince. Declaring that the Rainbow Saintess belongs to her, she violently curses Rose's detestable child. Elna screams for the prince, but Granat shields her and fiercely assures her he is completely fine. Granat turns his head slowly as he reveals a familiar embroidered cloth clutched securely in his grasp. The royal woman gasps in utter shock upon realizing he had the mysterious handkerchief with him all along. Elna instantly recognizes her lucky Gluck handkerchief, while Granat cherishes it as a gift from someone incredibly precious to him. Elna immediately misinterprets the situation, assuming this is the rainbow flower embroidered handkerchief he supposedly gave to Lady Lily. The furious woman marvels in absolute horror at the sheer amount of purification magic woven directly into the fabric. Still entirely missing the point, Elna silently assumes Granat and Lily were just getting incredibly close romantically. Granat sighs at Elna's dense nature when she questions how a simple embroidery could contain such potent purification magic. Turning his attention back to his enemy, he solemnly vows to teach her everything she needs to know. The deranged woman screams that they must make this royal nuisance disappear forever. She aggressively declares that the cursed handkerchief alone will never be enough to stop her wrath. Gathering immense power, she prepares to unleash her most powerful spell to end things in a single devastating instant. Granat braces himself for the inevitable clash as the deadly magic violently flares up around them. A calm, authoritative voice suddenly cuts through the chaos and commands the mother to stop. The crazed woman freezes instantly, her eyes widening in sheer shock as she calls out Smaragd's name. Shifting her tone, she desperately claims Prince Granat is trying to forcibly steal the Rainbow Saintess from her protection. Smaragd steps forward gracefully and gently reassures Granat that everything is finally all right. Confident in her control, the mother smiles sweetly and asks Smaragd to listen to her royal request. Smaragd looks at her with deep disappointment, admitting his hopes for her change of heart were completely in vain. The mother's confident smile instantly shatters as utter confusion takes over her bewildered face. Ignoring her entirely, Smaragd turns to Granat and Elna to kindly check if they are all right. Granat confirms his safety, proudly declaring that the handkerchief Smaragd and their sister gave him saved his life. Smaragd smiles in profound relief, noting that Paul is also deeply worried about their younger brother. He kindly advises Granat to go see their sister later, which Granat warmly and immediately agrees to. Elna watches the exchange in pure bewilderment, slowly realizing this imposing newcomer is actually an ally. Her mind completely short-circuits as Granat reveals his siblings personally bought the handkerchief for him in the royal capital. Elna frantically questions how the esteemed prince and princess went out of their way to visit Faden just for him. Staring intensely at the colorful embroidery, she suddenly remembers the specific rainbow flower design and attempts to piece the wild truth together. Recognizing her instantly, the newcomer points out that she is the young lady from their previous encounter, causing her to gasp in surprise. Noting her confusion, he explains that they had previously met in the castle town while he was in disguise, prompting the prince to ask if they knew each other. He confirms she is the girl who gave the handkerchief to Paul, triggering a sudden realization as she remembers the disguised stranger. Clenching his fist, he apologizes for not thanking her properly back then and clarifies that Lady Paul is actually his older sister. Shouting Smaragd's name, Granat furiously demands to know if his brother was the one who supplied the purification handkerchief, though Smaragd coldly dismisses the question. Maintaining his composure, Smaragd calmly explains that Paul stubbornly insisted and begged him to pass the handkerchief along to Granat. Furious at the sudden revelation, the sinister woman screams out and demands to know what the two brothers are secretly scheming. Staring her down, Smaragd asks if she truly thought he was blind to her interference, admitting he had been cautiously watching her for a long time despite lacking solid proof. The sinister woman recoils in absolute shock as Smaragd delivers a crushing blow, revealing that their father had also been perfectly aware of her dark actions. Stepping closer, he coldly points out that the number of people capable of casting curse magic on the queen from within the royal palace is severely limited. Driving his point home, Smaragd notes that she has always deliberately shunned both Lady Rose and Granat. Cornering the horrified woman, he sternly orders her to surrender and come with him immediately because their father is waiting for her. Trembling under the crushing weight of her exposure, she stammers in sheer disbelief and desperately tries to deny reality. As Granat softly calls out to his older brother, Smaragd solemnly admits he already discussed the matter with their father since the culprit is ultimately his own mother. Sparing his younger brother from further heartbreak, Smaragd instructs Granat to tend to Elna's wounds so he will not have to watch his mother disgrace herself any further. Turning to leave, Smaragd casually reveals that Theo was the one who informed him of the crisis and advises Granat to properly praise his diligent guard. Slumping in sheer exhaustion, Elna weakly questions if she is finally safe and if the terrifying ordeal has truly come to an end. Rushing to her side, the deeply concerned prince desperately calls out Lady Elna's name. Realizing that she had been drugged earlier, a heavy wave of overpowering sleepiness violently crashes over her the moment her adrenaline fades. Fighting a losing battle against the heavy sedative, she weakly whispers the prince's name as her vision begins to fade into darkness. Gripping her fading form, Granat frantically screams her name just as she finally succumbs to the darkness and loses consciousness completely.